It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. God, it's Feedback Friday. And Scout is in my lap, so if you see weird arm movements, that's why, right, kitty? Yeah, right. Temperature is going up and down like a toilet seat here. Oh my God, it's like +3 Celsius some mornings, and then it's like 23 in the afternoon. I'm dying. But yeah, Feedback Friday. It was an interesting combination of factors this week. For people who are wondering, I will be at least sampling Dragon Age Veilguard on Twitch starting hopefully next week, assuming the install goes well and all that. Somebody actually paid for me to give my thoughts on the game. So we're going to, and this happened before it came out that only, friendly influencers got copies of the game, which means even though the reviews are glowing, we can't trust the reviews. So, that is sort of an example of gaming's integrity problem. And it's one of those things, right, that you don't give a review to someone you know is going to hate it. Unless it's like, something like, sorry, you don't give a review copy. Unless it's somebody like Zero Punctuation, though I believe Yahtzee pays for the games he covers. Where the shtick is just, that's what he always does. It's very rare he likes anything. But you don't give a game to somebody you know is going to shit on it unfairly. But the fact that there is no middle ground of this person is fair, they don't like everything, but they give it a fair shake. The algorithm doesn't like that. And that's, I didn't talk about social media and algorithms and everything like that on Tuesday, so I'm going to touch on that a bit now. If you like this content, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K. So yeah, let's face it, a lot of the reason gaming content is the way it is now is because everything's the algorithm, get clicks. And, that's unfortunate. No one has really been able to make, Second Wind has tried, but, make some sort of subscription service work. And it's sort of a catch-22, right? Because you have to earn a reputation in order to have anybody want to subscribe to your content. And then, how do you earn a reputation if there's no money? So we're not funding the good shit. And so we're getting shit. And so people are just, looking up Let's Plays, or, it's a few opinions that they trust. The fact that everything is being gamed for aggregators is a bit of an issue. I just read a story last night that even political polling companies are worried about, things like 538 and things that aggregate polls. That apparently the polls are too uniform to make sense statistically. There shouldn't be so many polls that are the same. Outlier polls happen. And the fact that so many of them are coming up exactly the same suggests that the pollsters are tweaking their results because, of course, pollsters get rewarded by aggregators for accuracy. So I guess they're gaming the fact that if everybody's wrong in the same way, you don't take a knock in the rankings. And personally, I think that majority opinion is often wrong. That's just me. But I have really found that often, pick any issue, the majority opinion that's safe to say usually has a pretty glaring error in it. Because when people are speaking to the crowd, they're just not gonna say things that will challenge anybody, because that doesn't make you popular. And unfortunately, I think it should, right? I think that somebody who's willing to say something challenging and back it up should be rewarded, and isn't. Though, getting to actual comments, Monday's video was hilarious. Obviously, the algorithm put my video on the radar of some people that clearly don't know what my channel is. And oh my god, whenever anybody insults the toys in my background, and Morty, but whenever somebody insults the toys in my background, it's like, oh, you miserable, angry, pathetic. Yeah, I shouldn't, but this is just what I think. Projection, all the projection, and the comments that the Monday's video was why being too critical is girl repellent, not being critical at all. I stipulated that, and they still had this emotional response of, oh, never criticize a woman, guys. Like, projection. And, you know, what that says to me is that these are people who have been given the criticism that they are too critical or too harsh in their criticisms, and they couldn't handle the criticism. So they went from you're being too critical to you're never allowed to criticize at all, which, of course, what is it? Ad reductive absurdum? Like, never getting criticized. That's not realistic. But there are ways of criticizing that are helpful. And then there are ways that are hilarious because it's so telling on themselves. And after all these like comments of projection, all the projection, I landed on a comment that said, another part of it is the people who tend to be overly critical of the partners tend to be the type of people with absolutely no shred of self-awareness whatsoever. The type of people who love to excessively point out other people's flaws, yet never take the time to do any form of self-reflection and work on themselves. And that's the problem with these overly critical people who act shocked on why they can never gain a partner. There we go. They go on to say, now don't get me wrong, people should have standards of the type of people they date, but there's a vast galaxy of difference between having standards and being a miserable, overly pedantic loser who treats every minuscule flaw as a major turnoff. It's very much something that is tied to this archaic notion of you have to criticize your partner to all oblivion, otherwise you're a spineless doormat and a beta male who lets your partner walk all over you. Which is one of those traits that can manifest from being raised in a toxic environment. There you go. I mean, we've seen that on full display in U.S. politics this week, where in a 24 to 48 hour period, we had a speaker, a comedian, but this is one of these things where I'm a comedian, okay? Doing something at a stand-up club, like a comedy club, is different than a charity benefit, for instance, right? It is different when you are doing comedy at anything that's associated with a cause or an organization. Of course, you reflect the organization with the set you decide to do. Of course you do. That is why you make more money doing corporate gigs. Of course you do. And so this comedian that called Puerto Rico a floating pile of garbage, JD Vance said, we got to stop getting offended by everything. And blah, blah, blah. And Trump's driving around in a garbage truck. And then, Biden says, the Puerto Rico's not garbage. The only, garbage are the supporters or something like that. And it's spoken, whatever, but whether Biden intended to slam all MAGA or not, the hypocrisy of going, oh, can't you take a joke, Puerto Rico? Come on, lighten up. And then they can't handle the exact same insult when it's applied to them. And I see, this is one of those things where I'm not seeing anyone else say that. It's not whether Biden was offside or onside with his comments. It's be prepared to be held to your own standards. If you're saying, can't you take a joke 24 hours ago, that was clearly something of a sarcastic comment using the comedian's own line against them, right? And then they can't take a joke. That, to me, is what matters. The lack of consistency in people who are running for leadership of the country is more significant to me, because you don't want someone in government that is just going to be, all over the place at the whims of their emotions. And unfortunately, part of the reason, no, let me rephrase that, because starting with unfortunately, it's observable that there's a gender gap in politics right now. And it's easy to say, oh, people who vote for the politician I don't like are just stupid, bad people. But that's not true. I do think that there is there are things affecting men that I think the language for is all wrong. We get hung up on rights. And it's not that. Boy world is incredibly harsh in a different way that girl world is. And, girls come out of girl world all tangled up and passive aggressive. Boys are coming out of boy world just broken. They're given this message that from about the age of 6, they have to handle everything themselves because they're boys. They can't go to people for support. They can't, they can't seek comfort because, oh, grow up, be a man, shit like that. It's not said like that, but let's face it. This idea of masculinity equals lacking in emotions, it's not healthy, and it's not even something that's been a historical concept. You read stuff, anything, pre-World War II, male characters like Sherlock Holmes. The Lord of the Rings was a throwback published post-World War II, but obviously of a sentiment that predated the Great Wars. Men are showing a lot of emotion. If you read, the Greek myths, there's a lot of displays of emotion. This idea that men are machines is new. And nobody likes it. That's the thing. Nobody likes it. And it's interesting because I am sort of because I was raised that way. And have worked a lot of male-dominated environments and recognize you don't get anywhere by being nice. You do have to stand up for yourself, and you do have to deal with criticism, and you do and you have to deal with unfairness. And it's really interesting that the very people that lecture on that can't handle me. And it's not one demographic of men. I've noticed there's, we're failing women in a very different way that we're failing men. And I do think that at the end of the day, and I've had some really interesting conversations with people who do like really, really cool models for corporations. And we're finally getting into the part of you can't structure integrity. You can't have a company with integrity in the moral sense. You can have a company that has integrity in that it holds together. But like I said on Tuesday's video, but integrity is internal in the individual. And you can have structures that encourage accountability. You can have structures that are safer. But integrity is an individual thing. And a lot of the discussions around what used to be called DEI now are doing exactly what I've been advocating this whole time, which is you have to treat individuals like individuals. And that includes individual sensitivities. Not everybody has the same sensitivities. We, on the Discord, and I have to apologize, the invites to the Discord did not go out last month because I was distracted by shit. So I apologize for that. We'll resume that for November. Somebody mentioned that to me. I sent him a Discord invite, so that was all worked out. But, you know, I sincerely apologize for that. That was an oversight, and I could be like, and this is an example of, yeah, there were reasons, and they were good reasons, but it was still an oversight. And it was one of those things where I'm like, did I send out the Discord link this month? Did I? I think I did. I don't know. But because this month, because Fucktober has felt like 3, time just, right. So I messed up and it's easily fixed. We'll get it, 5 days from now. Election day. Oh boy. But it really is, there's no way around treating people like individuals. And, that's where things like dignity of risk, reasonable accommodation, these are all disability community concepts, but they really do work for everybody, right? It's not complete accommodation. It's reasonable accommodation, right? It's not anybody is completely comfortable. It's everybody's a little bit uncomfortable. This is how we win. This is how we get collaboration. This is how we get, innovation. And there's a big difference between having quirks and being an asshole. And the difference is accountability. And now I'll tell you the story of how I lost my shit on someone this week. And it was minor losing shit, but shit was lost. There was somebody who I have to, you guys may notice that whenever there's a notification for anything, I repeat it again and again and again. And that is because a person needs to be told something an average of 7 times to really remember it, to be able to recall it. This is something I learned in television, where when it comes to ads, if you can't spend enough on ads so that somebody will see something a minimum of 7 times, it's a waste of money. It's diminishing returns. And so there is this uncanny valley of ad spend, where a lot of, that's the reason all the money you throw into Facebook marketing doesn't do anything. The impressions just burn through, and you have to spend a lot more than the minimum. Facebook's just making money off of people who think it's affordable advertising. Sure, it's advertising. It's not effective. So you have to repeat. But this particular person you had to ask them 4, 5, 6 times for anything. And it was, oh, I have a bad memory. I have a bad memory. I have a bad memory. And then this person started doing I already told you, I mentioned this before. I've already said this. I've said this before. And that, self-awareness dump stat territory. And I finally said to this person that I have to say things like, please stop saying, I already told you, or I already mentioned this. Because I have to say things 4, 5, 6 times to get it done. And I have PTSD, which means sometimes memory goes wibbly wobbly, especially right now, because I've been struggling with trauma symptoms since September. So yeah, that thing I've been asking you for weeks now, please, 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 please sign it, please. And of course, this person said, it's signed. I'll get it to you tomorrow. Don't have it yet, but the day is young. But this is the sort of thing where no one can do that. And everybody has things that they're not self-aware about, right? But when somebody checks you on something like that, you have one of two choices. You can either get defensive, or you can recognize, like, okay, this person is taking a risk saying this. Because I personally say, not, you're bad, no name calling, no insulting, anything like that. It's like, look, this is just what's happening. Please stop saying that. You can't expect perfection. Sometimes we have to repeat ourselves, right? And I try to run an inclusive work environment, which means people with ADHD, some types of ADHD, will need to repeat things. Will need some repetition. And it's not just that. I mean, little things like, I work with a lot of people with ADHD, and those people need very clear deadlines. So even if there isn't one, my go-to is like, Friday, okay, because that's reasonable. That's less work for me to do than for them, because a lot of people with ADHD, if they set a deadline for themselves, they don't follow it. But if somebody else sets a deadline, they will. So it's got to come from me. That's easy. If repeating things every so often is going to make your team run better, I'll do it. And I did find it annoying at first when I was younger, I had to get over myself in this regard. And this is what wisdom does, that I had a real hang up about being treated like people's secretaries when I was supposed to be their equal. And so repetition was one of those things that I felt, partially I have a thing about nagging because of how I was raised, so I don't want to nag. But then I learned about that principle that you do have to repeat things for people to get them. And so now it's like, get over yourself, do the repeating. This is just the reality of, first mention, second mention, third mention. I mean, the game mention. Every time I said last call, I learned this doing hospitality. You have to announce last call 3 times or somebody will complain that they didn't hear the announcement. And it's very possible they didn't hear the announcement. They may have been out for a smoke. They may have been in the bathroom. They may have just not heard it, right? So if you repeat multiple times and they say, I didn't hear the announcement, it's like, well, there were 3 of them. So it's more reasonable than a one and done. And that's the thing. People are more likely to give you things that you give out. And if they don't, that's a them problem, not a you problem. And that may be someone that you get space from. If you are expecting other people to give you things that you don't give, pro tip, all you guys that came and made a lot of false assumptions about me and then go, you're not listening, you're driving people away. Well, don't expect anything that you're not putting out there as well. That's just a basic fairness principle. If you want people to give you a chance, give them a chance. It's not smart to be an asshole and expect people to be nice to you anyway. Like, that's just what... No, people have the right to go, you're a jerk, I'm not listening to you. Love me, love my stuffed toys. And you guys know that the number of times I'm like, should I clean up the backdrop? And it was like, no. So that's just one of those things that, hey, person who popped off about that, you don't belong here. So either lighten up, ease up, or don't watch, but this is a you problem. And sometimes we all have blind spots. It's true. I know that as when I was doing games journalism, I was very concerned about my blind spots. And I tried to learn as much about the dev side of the industry. This was before I did dev work myself. I tried to learn as much about that as I possibly could so that when I was critical, it was fair. Even then, I look back now and, if I knew then what I knew now about dev, I probably would have been gentler on certain things, but that's experience, right? We learn, we grow. And I do think that a big part of integrity is admitting when you're wrong. Yeah. Or when you made a mistake. I also think that a big part of integrity is standing up and not people pleasing by apologizing when no apology is warranted or required. Because if you apologize when you're not really sorry, people will push you because they know you'll just cave. And people do try. People take cracks. Like, there are a lot of people out there who will push as far as you let them. Boundaries exist for a reason. And I mean, the number of YouTube videos I watch that I look at it is like, yeah, not really my thing. I don't necessarily agree with this. And I just move on. I don't leave this angry, condescending comment full of projection and assumptions, because that's just... I know my attitude when I see one of those comments. So it's like, I'm not going to be that guy. But it's amazing how many people think creators don't actually read comments. And so they put that stuff out there just as, like, I don't know, a text masturbation exercise. It's a really dark, lonely place to believe you're screaming into the void on the internet and no one is listening. And there's a lot of people functioning from that dark, lonely place. And I keep trying to do something about that. But obviously, I'm not going to accept inappropriate treatment. And I believe in fairness over niceness. Because, let's face it, a lot of the times niceness is profoundly unfair. You can't be nice to everybody and be fair. Fairness sometimes requires you to go, nope, we're not doing this. So we'll see what happens with Veilguard. We'll see what happens with the industry. A lot of people complained about AAA in the comments, and guys, indie games are not the great white hope of this industry. There's a completely different kind of toxicity in indie games. In AAA, it's about sales. In indie games, it's all about fitting in. And it is a very bad place for, I'll come right out and say it, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in indie gaming right now. that I do not see in AAA the same way. It's there. It's there because it's everywhere. We've got a problem right now socially. But indie games, there's a lot of, I've had a lot of epithets thrown at me and told I was a disgrace to the industry, and the word Zionist is attached to it. And they claim that Zionists is not a code for Jews, but nobody asks me what my opinion on Zionism is. They just assume. So if you're not asking me what my opinion is on that, because 8 in 10 Jewish people are Zionists, but that means 2 in 10 are not. And since nobody's asked me and they assume, there's no way I can't see that as Zionist equals Jew. Because they made the assumption based on knowing what religion I practice, not what my particular views are in that part. And that part of the world is messy. And no, I'm not going to derail in getting into my views on Zionism here. But the point is, nobody asked. And indie games are way worse for that right now. And that is just the canary in the coal mine. That is just the tip of the iceberg. There are way more right think, wrong think dichotomies in indie games. And that does not speak to a healthy community to me. So indie games are not the great white hope. We need a strong, accountable AAA gaming segment, because that's what drives all the money, right? That's what trains people to be good devs that can get a game shipped in the indie space. I hate to say that, but the schools, I teach, and there are massive holes in what students are learning in video game design programs. So the schools aren't doing it. We need AAA to give people that experience so they can go out and make their big magnum opus passion project, right? We need AAA to be healthy. Maybe it won't be as big as it is now, but we need it to be healthy. We need it to be sustainable. Indie is not going to solve our problems. And if you like indie games better, that's totally cool. Hey, I'm an indie game snob, right? Like, I was playing Oregon Trail on Tuesday. But we also need a robust AA industry. And that gets left out of the conversation. Maybe I'll talk about that next week. But anyway, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching. And where's the freaking feedback for there? Thanks for watching and have a great weekend.